Okay, I had to set the record button going too here. So, all right, here we go. So the last thing to tell you is gallery and speaker view. So the two options on the top right of your screen for those who are on computers, gallery view and speaker view. Speaker view shows most of your screen with the main person who's speaking, or the person who's currently speaking rather. Gallery view shows you everybody. And in this call, we've got already 65, we'll get more. It's gonna be a grid based on the size of your screen, and you can see a whole bunch of people that way. It all depends on what your viewing preferences are. I am recording this, so I will record it in speaker view so that the main guest of honor is always the one that everyone can see. Also, just so you guys know, if anyone is interested with the chat later on, I always record, save a text file with the chat if anyone wants to see any of it afterward. Okay, go ahead, Frank.
Thank you, Frenchie. Thank you for your continued support and being my partner here as we've pushed through the 19 fog and keep getting people together now. It seems like twice a week, which has been kind of the vision I've had for this. So we're hitting it. That's good. Thank you for your help, Todd. So I thought I would start off and hold up this. Let me get it. This is for some of you that saw the thread, this is the October 2002 paper mailer that Mike mailed me. And I think this is the first vintage that I bought from. In this mailer was 2001 Russian River Zin, which was the Carlisle, and Gumtree Ranch 01, Tom Feeney 01, and Dry Creek Petite 01, for example. A long time ago.
That was. I barely remember.
Yes, I was buying these wines, Mike, before I was even in Cellar Tracker. So I think the very first thing I tasted from you, at least that's in Cellar Tracker, is the 01 Reebly. And I know that one goes way back, way back. Just a little more history, and then I'm going to lob it to you to give you the center stage. I think the first time I met you, and I put the picture of us up from 2009 in the thread. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's posted there. Don't laugh at Mike and I. We're kind of younger back then. Mike used to be at what was called the Copan Custom Crush Facility on Hopper in Santa Rosa. And that's when I was visiting Mike years ago, along with Wells, who was making his wines there, of course, too, for Copan. Mike finally found the good fortune, and because of the way he's busted his ass over the years to build this winery and this great brand of wines, finally got his own place, and you'll see some pictures of that in a minute over on, Mike, is it East Side Road?
Star Road. It runs parallel to East Side Road.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've drank a lot of Mike's wines over the years, and the Zinfandels, I don't buy them all, but some stay close to my heart. Mancini. I've got the 14 Pagani open tonight, which the aromatics on this are just absolutely stunning, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
So it was a pleasure that you agreed to do this, and we've got 65 people on tonight, so I'm going to stop talking and throw it to you to take us through a bit of your story.
All right. Well, thank you, Frank and Todd, for arranging this, and thank you, everyone who's joined us. And first and foremost, I hope everyone is well and safe at the moment. So one of the common questions, or most often asked questions that I get is, how did Carlisle come to be? So apologies to anyone on this Zoom conference that's heard the story, but I thought I'd give it to those who haven't. So basically, I was out of college for a couple of years, sitting at my desk writing software, and all of a sudden I kind of had an epiphany how quickly time goes by. And I thought, damn, if I'm not careful, I'm going to be 65 years old in front of a monitor and keyboard writing software. And I knew that was something I didn't want to do for the rest of my life. So I gave it a great deal of thought. And I had become a wine geek, a cork dork at a fairly young age. I had a much older sister in San Francisco who was a restaurateur and caterer. And I used to spend my summers living with her and working in her restaurants. And she was the one who, for better or for worse, introduced me to wine. Before that, I just thought, why would anyone drink it when you could have Welch's grape juice? But she showed me there was more to it than that. So I guess I owe something to my oldest sister. But anyway, so I figured I wanted to do something with wine. but not being a sales kind of person that ruled out wholesale retail, but being somewhat technically minded, I thought, okay, maybe I'd like producing it. So started as a home winemaker. Actually did a little bit of Rosé Pinot with a friend in his house in Venice Beach in Southern California in 1986, but we won't count that. In 1987, moved up to San Francisco, and I made 100 pounds of Zinfandel in my kitchen of my apartment, enough for about a 5-gallon glass carboy. The wine turned out horribly. I ended up throwing it down the sink, but more importantly, I think I realized I really enjoyed the process of making wine, and realized that if you have any hope of trying to make something that you're going to want to drink, you really kind of have to make a full barrel worth, I would say. So I found a friend with a nice kind of subterranean garage in Berkeley, who agreed, and said, yeah, you can make a barrel of wine with me over in my garage. So we started doing that for a couple of years. And then of course, Loma Prieta hit. And since I lived in the marina with my wife, Kendall, we were displaced for a while. And we thought, we really should probably find accommodations not on landfill, because we saw what happens when a big earthquake comes on its landfill. It's not pretty. So we bought our first home up in Santa Rosa, which was great because we were pretty much going up to the wine country every weekend anyway. So, and in our garage, there was a little nook, and Kendall said, oh, honey, you can put your barrel of wine there. So the first year, when we moved there in 1990, it was a barrel, but then next year it became 3 barrels. And then after that, it was 5 barrels, and then 7, then 9. And pretty soon we were making 300 cases a year in our garage. And I was taking my vacation from work to do this. I'd started a kind of a mini home winemaking club, if you will. There were 25 members, because obviously I can't drink 300 cases. I mean, I tried, but I can't. So we split the wine 25 ways, and everyone got, generally about 12 cases of a mix of different wines. It was a lot of fun, and we'd always have a release party at our house. Kendall would cook up just, incredible food, and we'd all drink wine and eat, and everyone would go home happy. So, but it was beginning to get a little out of hand. I was spending a lot of time doing it. So Kendall finally said, look, honey, it's time we fish or cut bait. We either got to scale this back or we got to take it forward. So 1998 was our first commercial year. Made 675 cases. And keep in mind, I still had my full-time day job in San Francisco. So I was commuting by bus every day from Santa Rosa to San Francisco. It was up at 4:10, on the bus at 4:45, into work at 6:45. And really didn't matter what time I left. It was at least 2.5 hours. That was a good day coming home. A lot of times it could be 3 hours. So it was pretty crazy, but made 675 cases that first year, 775 in 99. In 2000, I made 1,000 cases, and that was about as much as I could handle and still try to maintain this software job in San Francisco for Barclays Global Investors. So, but I found myself in this catch-22. At 1,000 cases, we were never going to make enough money that I was going to be able to give up my day job. Maybe if we'd been making Cabernet, but I happened to choose Zinfandel. So anyway, so the solution was we hired a good friend of mine from college who had gone back to Davis, and he got a 2nd degree in viticulture and enology, Jay Maddox. He joined us in 2001. With him on board, we jumped to 2,500 cases, which was huge financially, at least for us, because you don't see that money come back for 2 years. We stayed at 2,500 in 2002. 2003, we went to 3,500. And so now by '04, I'd been doing this commute for 15 years, and I was absolutely exhausted from it. Didn't think I could do it another day, but fortunately, one morning, Kendall said, "Good news, honey, we're making enough money at the winery. You get to give up your day job." So went into work. I always got in much earlier than my manager, and was going to give notice, and I was nervous, so went downstairs onto Market Street there, downtown San Francisco, and there was a newsstand, Fog City News. And Incorporated Magazine had just done an article on us and how we'd used our salaries as seed capital to get this winery going. And I hadn't seen the issue yet, but there it was on the newsstand. I thought, oh, cool. So I bought it. I found the article. It was entitled, "Don't Quit Your Day Job." So you can imagine the panic that I felt. But, I called up Kendall and I said, it's an omen. I'm not supposed to quit, but she assured me everything was going to be fine. And as usual, she was right, and gave notice. And so now today, she was able to give up her full-time job in the city the next year. And we finally moved out of Custom Crush in 2013, I guess it was, yeah. And we're up now to between 9,000 and 10,000 cases, and have our own winery, and it's all been a dream come true. So
well, it's a great runway of different events and things that took place. Can you show some of those photos of the early days that we looked at together?
Yeah, sure. Let me just turn screen share on, and let's see. Here is so hopefully you guys can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep. So that's the garage. That's about let's see how many barrels are in there. That's 7, and yeah, that's about 300 cases. So you can see the 6-spout bottle filter from Italy right there, and the baby, our daughter's baby stroller right behind it. So, and the press over here that would hold about a half ton of grapes. So, but I kept the garage pretty pristine, as you can see. It was literally like a micro winery. So let me see if I can find.
And Mike, what maybe people don't know about you, and from the visits that we've had together over the years, is that you're very precise and very clean. And if you go into your barrel room, it is spotless.
Spotless. I that's something I never really thought about, but our son, who graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo 2 years ago with a degree in wine and vit, he's done a couple harvests. Actually, I guess it was last year. So he worked harvests in Oregon, and he's worked harvests in New Zealand. And he said, "Yeah, Dad, you got the cleanest winery of any place I've ever seen." So, but here's another picture of us. This would have been 1993, because our daughter was about 6 months old right there. So
in the garage still.
But back when I actually had hair. So,
it's that commute. It took it all away.
Oh, it did. Well, either that or the winery. I'm not sure which.
Yeah.
So, and then let's see. So then, when we started Carlisle, and I'll just show you this. That's how I used to do my punch downs. That's a half ton of grapes. Don't remember what it was. It looks awfully dark, but it could have been Zinfandel. But I punched it down by hand. That's how I got my workouts. So
it's a good picture. That stuff is dark staining.
Yeah, I'd go to work and people would look at me in meetings like, "What do you do?" So, but also in 1998, the same year that we started Carlisle, we purchased the old Paletti Ranch. This was one of the Deloach vineyard designates. I think the first vineyard, or the first vintage that Deloach vineyard designated this, was 1990. And we purchased it in 1998. actually moved down into this little ranch house that was built in 1927, the same year that the vineyard was planted. And you can see the oak tree here. That was basically our inspiration for our label. So if you look at our label, you'll see in the background an oak tree with the vines in front. And this is kind of where it came from. And in fact, I'll let you in on a little secret because it's really hard to see on our label. But hopefully you guys with bigger screens can see it. But here's kind of the same oak tree and the vines. And right here, if you can see my cursor, that's my daughter. And then my son is right next to her, looking kind of off to the other side of the page there.
That's cool.
So, anyway.
That's cool.
So those were the early days. They were tough. Kendall, she handles pretty much all matters financial for the winery, insurance, compliance, and she was, basically with 2 small kids, she was working from 10 till 2 every night, and I was going to bed at 10 and then getting up at 4, so we didn't overlap much, but we did what we had to do to make it work.
So Mike, those wines you made in the early days, and I know you said 98 was kind of the year that everything got cracking. Have you had a recent bottle of something that's 15, 20 years old out of the cellar, and what did you think of it?
I did a couple of years ago. I made it a mission to start with the 98s and taste every single wine we've produced so I could update our drinkability chart on our website. And so, I found some have held up and offer some enjoyment, but I got to be honest, a lot of them, nope, pretty much DOA. So the drinkability chart reflects that now.
Okay, well, good.
But I gotta say that also is a reflection of my own palate. So, there are people who like secondary and tertiary characteristics in their wines that come from age. But I don't know, being a native Californian, I'm all about the fruit. So
as we look at your tenure of making wine, and I got someone sent me this question. Was there a point in your body of work, a particular vintage, where you made a shift in how you thought about the winemaking process, and you did something different, which you've now continued to do since that time? Is there something like that in your history?
There is, but I wouldn't say that it was one single moment. It was kind of a very gradual. I mean, it's like a huge oil tanker out at sea, having to make a turn. It starts very early and slowly makes the turn. And so, in 2005, we made some Syrahs from Bennett Valley that were much more cool climate in style, I would say. And I really like that. I like savoriness in Syrah. I said I was a fruit guy. Yes, I do like fruit, but I also do like the savory characteristics. And we did that in 2005, and I liked that. And so that got me thinking, and we started kind of heading more in that direction, eventually giving up our Syrah sources that did kind of emphasize more just fruit. And then we took on, for example, Rosella's Vineyard and Sierra Mar Vineyard in Santa Lucia Islands for Syrah, which do provide a lot of savory character. But I would say the shift kind of happened in 2005 and then progressed through maybe 2010 is an outlier. I mean, that was a freak vintage. It's kind of one that I'd just like to lift the carpet up and sweep under and just forget about it, walk away. But by 2011, I would say we had come to the point where I thought we had it pretty dialed in.
Okay. And then when in your body of work did you make a decision to focus on whites?
I was doing some winemaker dinners, and you know, all we had were Zinfandels and Syrahs and all big reds. And of course, you know, the chefs were coming up with menus to accompany, you know, 5 or 6 big reds. But, you know, I'd go back to my hotel and wake up in the middle of the night feeling my blood slowing. You know, it was like my arteries were clogging. So I realized, you know, we really needed some whites. I always claimed I'd never make a see-through, but it just got to the point where, no, you know, we need some whites in the portfolio. You know, interestingly, I always thought if we did a white, it would probably be a Rhone-based white, something Viognier, Marsanne, Roussanne, Picpoul, you know, who knows what. But then I got to thinking, I was offered Muscadel from Pagani Ranch. That was old vine, planted in 1920. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, there are old vine whites, you know, and that's kind of cool. And why not make an old vine white blend or something? And so then we you know, through Morgan at Bedrock, we were able to secure some Simeon from Monte Rosso. And it's like, oh, this is cool. So that's kind of how the derivative was born.
Right.
And then we also did Campani Portus, and then, not that it really fits the portfolio, but I happen to be a huge lover of Gruner Veltliner. And so we made Sonoma County's first Gruner. And I believe there's still only 2 of us today that make the variety here in Sonoma.
Yeah, so those early years when I used to visit, things have changed for you, and your portfolio has broadened significantly. And I remember one story today when I was thinking about talking to you. If you remember the year you were at Capon Custom Crush, and it was myself and maybe Rob Wynn and Chris Fitch, and we came by to visit, and I had a bottle inside of a brown bag, and I thought, I'll be a wise guy and I'll pour it for you and see if you liked it. And it happened to be your 03 Petite Syrah. And I don't remember if you guessed it or not, but it was one of those moments I remember back fondly about us and being together with you.
Oh, hopefully I didn't say like, this sucks or something, you know?
You know, you don't want to put someone on the spot like that, but those were some fun years.
Oh, they were, and you know, and they're still fun. But I think we've kind of more zeroed in on the vineyards that we like and we want to continue working with. You know, I mean, a lot of times you don't know until you give a vineyard a shot, right? So we've given vineyards shots, but you know, I think right now we got it pretty dialed in.
So why don't we transition then and talk about the vineyards for a moment? And I know you have some photographs that you want to share with the audience to show some of the things that resonate for you, that create a good visual impact. Why don't we do that now?
Sure. Let me turn share back on.
Okay.
All right. So let's see. Well, we'll come back to this one. Well, so I mentioned, you know, buying Carlisle Vineyard in 1998. So hopefully everyone can see it. Can you, Frank?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So this is our own Carlisle Vineyard. Used to be known as Paletti Ranch, but unfortunately, because of trademark issues, we weren't allowed to call it Paletti. You know, at first that really killed me, but because it was planted by Alcide Paletti in 1927. He was a first-generation Italian immigrant from a little village north of Lucca in Tuscany called San Pellegrinetto. And he came over here as a teenager to find a better life, married Maria Teresa Frati, who was from the same village, or at least her family was from the same village. And with help from his father-in-law, Giuseppe Frati, he purchased this property, planted it. Interestingly, his daughter told me that the whole property was nothing but oak trees, like you see in the background there. And Alcide, in order to clear it, he just went to the local hardware store and he bought a couple boxes of dynamite and he just started blowing up the trees. So, yeah, no, I don't think you'd get away with that today. But,
is this a mixed blacks property?
Well, so this is 87% Zinfandel, but in that remaining 13% are 40 other varieties, and 10 of those varieties being white varieties. So of all the old vine vineyards I know of and have worked with, this one is by far the most varied. There's other vineyards I've seen with 20 varieties, maybe 24, 26 varieties, but certainly nothing with 40 varieties. And there's some weird stuff here. I mean, there's some Albio Mayor, which is a white variety from the Ribera del Duero, and this is the only vineyard that we've ever seen it in. So, you know, how it made it, I don't know.
Wow.
It's anyone's guess. Unfortunately, they didn't keep great records.
There's a vine in this photo, like the 8 o'clock position. It looks abnormally bigger than all the rest.
Sorry, let me go back there.
Yeah, just curious.
Right, I see that. That is probably a Carignan, or it actually could be one of the Albio Mayor vines because they're quite large. Very gangly, almost some of the Albio Mayor vines look like octopi. They have these long interweaving arms to them, so it's kind of cool.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining that.
Sure. So here's basically the core team. The only other person not here is Paul, our cellar master, but we got Jay on the right, who's been with us all the way since 2001. A long time. He's coming up to 20 years. That's great.
That's a long time.
Kendall and me. And this was an old walnut tree that we're standing next to that Alcide planted in 1927. So let's see what else. A lot of people know our Montafi Ranch Zinfandel. This is a vine in early spring with a couple weeks growth, maybe a month's growth. And not too far away from Carlisle Vineyard, probably as the crow flies, just a couple miles, but similar soils. Soil in this area of the Piner Olivet region of the Russian River Valley is all Huachica loam. It's a clay-based loam. It's kind of known for having a lot of vernal pools. There's probably a lot of vineyards were planted back in the 20s and even before that, that would not be able to be planted today due to environmental protection laws and things, wanting to preserve those vernal pools. Now, one of the things about Montafi is that its kind of calling card or distinct characteristic is a slight menthol quality. And this isn't a great picture, but it's prior to the vineyard being pruned, but you can see in the background here, these are eucalyptus trees, and prevailing winds are always out of the southwest here. And so during the course of the growing season, it blows all the resins and oils off the eucalyptus trees, and they adhere to the waxy bloom of the grapes that are developing here in the vineyard. So when we get this crushed and into tank and it starts to ferment, it actually smells like a giant vat of those Andes after dinner chocolate mints. The eucalyptol, which is the compound giving that strong eucalyptus smell, is fairly volatile though, and through fermentation, I think a lot of it blows off, but some definitely remains in the wine, more so in some years than others. Then our other big gun, Zinfandel, of course, that a lot of people know is Pepera Ranch. So here's a picture of Pepera. After a nice winter day, you got snow-capped Mount St. Helena in the background. And Pepera was planted in 1934. It's kind of interesting. After the repeal of Prohibition, we stopped seeing vineyards planted that had a lot of mixed blacks in them. Instead, they were more uniform. And Pepera is kind of right at that transition point. So there's 6 blocks. 5 of them average about 96% Zinfandel, 4% Carignan. Maybe there's a few other vines sprinkled in there. I've seen some Syrah, I've seen some Bouteille Noir, I've seen actually a little bit of Cab Franc. The one outlier block is Bedrock's block, and that's about 50% Zin, 40% Carignan, and 10% other stuff. But even in that block, you can almost draw a line right down the middle of it and say, okay, this is the Carignan half, this is the Zinfandel half. So it's kind of interesting. But what's amazing about Papera is just how uniform the vines are in terms of their health. Usually in a vineyard this old, you would start to see a lot of variability amongst the vines in terms of vigor and health and production. But at Papera, it's very, very homogeneous, very, very uniform. I think it might be a function of the soils. They're a little bit deeper here. In this area, the Piner Olivet area, because of those vernal pools and any pooling of the water with that Huachica clay loam soil, you do tend to develop a bit of hardpan, actually a lot of hardpan. And it can be anywhere from 8 inches down to maybe a couple feet down. So maybe the soils are deeper here at Papera, which leads to better uniformity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then not too far away from Papera, just a stone's throw up the street, we have Cytone Ranch. This is a old vine, Carignan vine at Cytone. And you can actually see kind of at the base down here, there was once a stake, probably the original stake, but you know, it's all rotted off, but the vine kind of grew around the stake. So it became one with the stake.
It certainly did. And one with the moss too.
Yeah, along with the moss and all the lichens and everything. So
yeah,
that's cool.
That's cool.
Let's see what else we can show you. We showed you Montafi. Kitty Corner. So Papera Ranch is right on the northwest corner of the intersection of Piner and Olivet roads. On the southeast corner of Piner and Olivet, just across the intersection, is Mancini. And Mancini was planted in 1922, I believe. So being prior to the repeal of Prohibition, much more traditional in terms of a mix of varieties. In the reds, this runs about 85% Zinfandel, 15% mixed blacks. But we see, you know, that's one of the really neat things about these old vine vineyards is that mixed black component, because every vineyard is kind of unique in what it has. And in this vineyard, even though it's just a stone's throw from Carlisle vineyard, we find varieties here that we don't find in Carlisle. For example, this vineyard has a lot of Val de Guillet, also known as Napa Gamay, or was known as Napa Gamay back in the 70s and 80s. We also find a fair amount of Bourrieux in this vineyard. Synonym here in California is early Burgundy. And then we do get, this is one of the sources, or has been one of the sources for some of our whites that go into the derivative. There's one block in particular that is probably about 70% white, 30% red, oddly enough. I don't know if they were always picked all together or if they picked them out separately, but if you were going to pick them separately, then why plant them intermixed? That's kind of weird. Not really sure, but the whites here are predominantly Colombard and Muscadel with a little bit of Palomino, and we actually did find a vine of Elbling, which is a very, very old German variety. But one of the things about Muscadel that we've discovered is that the bees love it. So here's a very close-up shot of some bees working on some Muscadel berries very close to harvest. So anytime you sample Muscadel in a vineyard and you're doing berry sampling, you always have to watch where you put your fingers, because chances are there's going to be bees on the clusters.
Mike, that plot, I know you haven't made it, at least the red from that for many years. I find that to be my palate, the Zinfandel that has, for me, the most defining acidity. Would that be a fair statement, or is that just my palate?
No, that's definitely a fair statement, and I would say the same. Um, there is a lot of Carignan planted in this vineyard, so we do have a lot of that. Carignan typically ripens about anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks after Zinfandel, or we'll call it 1 to 3 weeks after Zinfandel. But we're picking that Carignan at the same time as Zen. And so, it's in a window of ripeness, certainly. Could be 22 and a half bricks, 23 bricks, but it's loaded with acidity. And Zinfandel, grown in a cool climate, will retain a lot of acid as well. So you're kind of getting a double punch of acid in the final wine. So yes, the finished pH of Mancini is typically in the 3.3s, which is, white wine territory.
Yep, I noticed that. That's a great bottle of wine. I love that vineyard.
Yeah, I do too. So I'll show you a very sad picture because this one doesn't exist anymore, but here's kind of a panoramic of Barbieri in the wintertime. And this was one of the great old Deloach vineyard designates right on Olivet Road that was sold in 2006. And we had a 5-year evergreen contract for it. And the new owners basically kind of thumbed their noses up at us and said, tough, we're going to rip it out. We can do whatever we want. So this was planted in 1906 and just contained an incredible treasure trove of mixed black varieties. This vineyard contains some of the finest Grenache I have ever seen. It was glorious, glorious fruit, as well as some really nice Tempranillo and some stuff that I hadn't even identified yet. And after the 2006 vintage, it was sold. 2007, they brought in a D9, and in pretty much one day, 22 acres of 101-year-old vines were gone. And in fact, it was losing this vineyard and having this experience that led to the idea of starting the Historic Vineyard Society, which I'm sure a lot of people know by now, but it's a nonprofit dedicated to the promotion and preservation of old vine vineyards in California, because we really do regard them as our viticultural heritage and treasures. And, just as we preserve old vine buildings and other historical artifacts, we feel that these old vine vineyards should be preserved as well.
And so that the society has been in place for how long?
Oh, I should know the answer to this. I want to say since 2010, I believe. And that kind of ties into Wine Berserkers as well, because it was right about that time that I was lamenting the loss of this vineyard to Morgan Twain Peterson of Bedrock, and said we really need an organization dedicated to old vine vineyards, because a lot of the old vine vineyards are Zinfandel, so part of that falls into ZAP, but not all old vine vineyards are Zinfandel. It's old vine Mourvedre, Petit Syrah, Muscadel, Carignan, all kinds of other things. Morgan thought it was a great idea. And at the same time, Mike Dildine on Wine Berserkers had started a thread trying to enumerate all the old vine vineyards in California. And I had been trying to help Mike and provide as much information as I could. And we thought, hey, let's invite Mike up for lunch. And then Morgan said, well, let's include Tegan Pasalacqua from Shirley. And so the four of us had lunch, and that was kind of the birth of the Historic Vineyard Society. And shortly after that, we added David Gates and Bob Bialy to the board. So we're doing what we can.
Yeah, we all try to do the best we can to preserve the things and promote the things that we care for. So I want to ask you then this question. What caused you to feel so passionate about Zinfandel and make this kind of the anchor of who you and Kendall are today?
That's a good question. You know, I'm not exactly sure what or why I gravitated so strongly to Zinfandel. It was probably several reasons. One, I enjoy the wines quite a bit, always have. Two, I think Zinfandel is kind of considered a bit of an underdog by a lot of people, and so I kind of relate to that maybe. But probably the biggest reason is just California's rich history with the variety. I mean, it's basically a immigrant that has become a naturalized, full-fledged citizen of California now. You know, even though we know that it originated from Croatia and where it went by the names of Soljanak, Kastelanski, Pribidrag, it's really not grown. What I mean, in fact, if anything, they're trying to reestablish it there now because there were so few vines of it. But in California, it found a very happy home and has done incredibly well. And I think, you know, if I'm kind of at heart, I'm an old-fashioned romantic, you know, and you know, there's always talk about romance in the wine industry and everything, but it's a damn lot of work, trust me. Not a lot of romance, but I think these old vines do offer a lot of romance. You know, when you're out working in an old vine vineyard like this, and you think about, you know, a vine that's been in the ground for 100+ years, and if they could talk, all the stories they could tell, you know, and what they've been through, and how many hands have touched these vines in their history. I mean, and what are the stories of those people? I mean, it's fun stuff.
And what's better is that through the work of you and Mike and others and your craft every year, look at the 67 people on the call, that you're providing a connection to that romance and to that history for everyone to taste as much as they'd like. You know, it's as much as this 14's beautiful, this Pagani, which was planted in 1895, you know, God bless you for keeping the work up and doing the work of these vines to bring this stuff to us.
Oh, thanks. You know, I like to say the past enhances the present. So for that, we owe the past a future.
Todd, write that down, man. We got to put that up on the board somewhere.
I was just thinking that. Well, it's recorded, so we're all right.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So, Mike, maybe the last question I want to ask you before we start thinking about Q&A would be, well, two things. First off, if you could think back of the body of work that you've done to this point and all the vintages since '98, can you think of a wine that you're the most fond of that you've made?
Oh, you know, I get asked this fairly often, and it's always difficult to answer. I mean, certainly 2 Acres is very near and dear to my heart because this is a little 2-acre vineyard that didn't even really resemble a vineyard when I took it over. And that this vineyard served as my classroom for learning how to take care of a vineyard. It's where I learned how to prune, you know, how to sucker, how to leaf pull. You know, I've picked it, I've done everything there. And we've made it every single year, yes, we've made it every single year. And there was only 1 year that we did not bottle it because I did not feel it was up to snuff. But I've poured so much of myself into that little 2-acre vineyard that it holds a very special place in my heart. But as I kind of said at the start, we've dialed in now to the vineyards that we really love, and they're all very special to me, and they all perform differently in every year. It's not like every single year Carlisle Vineyard's my favorite. You know, 1 year of our Zens it might be Montafi, 1 year it might be Pepera, 1 year it might be Carlisle, another year it might be Rossi. So Yeah, it's hard to say. You know, it's like your children. You love them all.
It's probably an unfair question, but I appreciate your answer. And the 2 acres thing was, was from the heart. So I respect that. If we think then about vintage, and you think back, going back to '98, is there a vintage that you think allowed you to showcase your best work?
Well, you know, it's funny. People always accuse winemakers of saying their best wines are always the ones they have to sell. And you know, I don't know. Maybe there is some truth to that, but I actually think there's a reason why that is, and that's because, you know, in winemaking, it's not like beer where you can whip out a new batch every couple weeks or something. You know, in winemaking, unless you're doing an Antipodean harvest and a Northern Hemisphere harvest each year and doing two, you only get one swing at the piñata, you know, and once a year, that's it. And so winemaking is a craft. I won't go as far as saying it's an art, but it's a craft. And if you're passionate about your craft and you want to hone your craft, change comes slowly because you only have one shot a year. So I do think, you know, if you're passionate and you love what you do, your wines, provided Mother Nature cooperates, of course, your wines are going to get better and better and better with each vintage. So having said that, I'm quite high on our 2018s. Mother Nature cooperated fabulously that year. Prior to that, though, 2016, I also am a big fan of. But, you know, truthfully, I would say even our 2011s, which was a vintage that I think got unfairly maligned, I think from 2011 on, I feel like we've been doing really, really good work.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know there's a lot of things that are being opened and enjoyed tonight. I haven't had a chance to look at that, but you've got a lot of fans on this call. So let me ask you one final question before we go to Q&A about moving away from vintages and vineyards. When you sit down and you want to open up something that really you want to drink and that you appreciate, what bottle is that? Not your wine necessarily. What bottle is that?
Oh man, how long do you have? Geez, it's more like hundreds of bottles.
Pick three.
Well, you know, my palate is quite varied. I love all wine as long as it's well made. I mean, I love the Chinon. I love Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I even like Barossa Shiraz. I mean, I like whites. I like reds. I'll even drink Pinotage if it's well made. You know, so
that's more than three, Mike. Come on.
I know. Okay, but I'll say Châteauneuf-du-Pape is definitely a comfort wine for me. I love champagne, and geez, it's hard. Chablis.
Okay, so then the follow-up to the last question is, the last bottle that you drank that's left a tremendous kind of imprint or impression upon you, what wine was that? The very last one.
Well, I have a horrible memory. So last night we had a 2010 Rostang Ampodium that I really, really liked. And we also had a Von Vinning Unga Air Grosses Gewächs Riesling 2013. And that was very good too.
Okay, good. Look how you did in the spot. You did great.
Yeah, I can only remember about 24 hours.
That's all right. That's why we have wine of the year lists and we write that stuff down, because God knows the older we get, at least me, half the shit I can't remember anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Todd, we're just short of 6, and so we should move to Q&A, and let's tee that up so give Mike a chance to talk to the audience.
All right, guys. So this is the time, by the way, Mike, just so you know, this is the first time I think I've seen the participants not move at all. So I think we had 67 participants and nobody's left. So apparently you're saying something interesting enough that nobody's leaving. Because normally we have a little bit of feet, you know, some will drop and some more will come on late or whatever, but it's held steady. So that's pretty amazing. All right, so we already have one person, but use the raise hand function. It's often if you go to the bottom of your screen, you mouse over or you click participants, or sometimes people have it on the left bottom of their screen. It just says raise hand. And then we can see that raised hand over here. And then I will call on you, unmute you, and then you can ask your questions directly to Mike. And we already got started here. Dan Fusco is first. And Dan,
playoff beers. Let's see it.
Playoff beer. Dan Fusco, you are unmuted.
Hey guys, Mike, thanks a lot for coming on tonight, and Todd and Frank for hosting this. I'm relatively new to the Carlisle lineup, so I guess not to put any pressure on you, but Bedrock just did a library release. Any chance we see anything from you?
Yes and no. One, we don't have much of a library, unfortunately. I try to hold back a case or two of each wine we produce. Sometimes I'm successful doing that, sometimes I'm not, but they're there for those who ask. But also, we just quietly launched an open store on our website because we did hold back a little bit of some wines for visitors to the winery, but obviously because of COVID-19, we can't have visitors. So we thought, well, if people can't come to us, we'll go to them. So you'll see now in the menu of our website, a purchase link, and we have 2016, that's not much of a library or going back very far, but there's 2016 Integral, 2017 Rossi Grenache, and then a new release.
Cool.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. Next is, here we go. Chris
Counselor
Cyber, you're up. Counselor Cyber.
Side man.
There you go.
Sideboard.
Hi, Mike. Little sage hand love to you here.
Hey.
It's Andrew, both on screen. Look at that.
Love your shirt.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't think about that.
Mike, have you ever experimented with earlier harvesting at any of these sites? And whether you did or not, what do you think is the opportunity or potential for a kind of earlier harvested style at vineyards like this? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Sure. Yeah, we have. We made a Zinfandel from Papera in 2014? No. It's more like 2009, 08, 07, sometime around there from Papera. We called it Cuvée Corti after Daryl Corti because Daryl made the pronouncement that he would not sell any wine over, I think, 14.5 in his store. No, anything over 14%. And so we picked Papera targeting 14%. Not all of it, just a portion. We overshot it. We missed it. It ended up being 14.3. But the wine was so acidic that it was like face melting acidic. It was just nasty. And, you know, there are times where, yeah, you can do that if your numbers are in balance. But just as picking too ripe, you lose terroir and vineyard identity. Picking not ripe enough does the exact same thing. You lose terroir and identity. So I don't know. I feel like Zinfandel as a variety has a naturally higher sweet spot in terms of alcohol. Yes, it's gotten out of hand. I think the pendulum has swung back. But I think, you know, trying to make a 13.5 Zin, you can do it. I think it won't really represent the terroir as well as it could.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Yeah, Chris always asks the best questions. So whenever he's on a call, you know that there's going to be some, he's going to dig deep, you know.
Yeah.
We got to be sure that, we got to make him like a co-host to make sure that he's on all these to ask the good questions. So, all right, next is Jeff Bloom. You are unmuted.
My
Jeff?
cellar is,
There you go.
yeah.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi. My cellar is full of lots of different grapes you make. Now there's even, I've got the Pinot, you've got a Cabernet. Have you ever been offered a grape that you said, no, I don't want to make that wine?
it's hard for me to say grape. Definitely vineyards I've said no to, but they were probably within our portfolio of grapes. You know, I think most growers probably, if they do their homework, they're going to look at our portfolio, and if they're growing Merlot, they're not going to try to call me up and sell that to me. So, but I'm pretty happy with the varieties that we work with. Yeah, the Pinot was a one-off. We are doing the Cabernet now on a regular basis, only because it actually is old vine. It's on St. George. It's dry farmed. It was planted in the 60s. It's some of the oldest Cabernet in Sonoma. So it very much kind of fits with our whole ethos. Yeah, in terms of varieties, I can't think of anything, you know, obscure that I've said, no, I won't do that.
Mike, how many different wines are you making now? Let's say in 2019, how many different bottlings will you make?
The most we've made, I think, is 28 or 29, but we're trying to hold it to 24 or less, just because that's where the work comes in, is having to maintain so many separate lots and the record keeping for that. It's actually fairly onerous. So we're just, you know, we're getting older. We're trying to simplify a bit.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Next is Lisa Potts. Lisa, you are unmuted. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, I might have a kind of a elementary Zinfandel question, but
Sure.
I'm wondering why old vines are so important for Zinfandel, when in other grapes we see the vines being turned over every 20 years or so. And is there an age at which the vines become optimal or most mature?
I love this question.
Well, that's not a basic or simple question at all. That's quite a deep question. You know, so yeah, certain varieties do have different longevities. That is true. For example, Petite Syrah is highly prone to fungal diseases, Eutypa, bot canker, and other things. So it's hard for Petite Syrah to make old bones. You know, you will find it 75, 80 years old, but often at that age it becomes highly virused and really isn't producing quality fruit. With Zinfandel, though, it's a very prolific producer. And so by the time it hits, 50, 60, 70 years old, it becomes much more self-regulating. It doesn't produce a lot of fruit, but what fruit it produces is very intense and very concentrated. That's not to say that you can't make great Zen from young vines. You can. Maybe it's just more work. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm lazy. That's why I like old vines, because they do the work for you. They're self-moderating. But unfortunately today, no one really plants a vineyard, or very few people. There are a couple exceptions like Larry Turley. No one plants a vineyard today with the intention of it lasting multiple generations. Once they run the depreciation schedule on the vineyard, then it's like, oh, time to rip it up and replant.
It's just that so basically it's just that Zinfandel vines just last longer and aren't subject to disease as much. They just last longer, basically.
Yeah, they tolerate disease pretty well, or the rootstock, at least. St. George will tolerate virus fairly well, along with Zinfandel as a scion on the St. George rootstock. So, yeah. I've
always wondered that, because so many, yeah, if you've got 15, 20-year-old Cabernet, they look at it and they're like, oh, let's replant that.
Yeah.
Maybe because the price per ton is so much more, they can afford to do it, and you can't do that with Zinfandel. Maybe, yeah, you're not getting the right price per ton, so you can't afford to replant. So, all right, next we got Bill and Jane. You are unmuted.
Sounds like a movie.
Hi, Mike. It's just Bill. My name is Bill Anzelo. My wife isn't with me at the moment.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. the two of us had an opportunity to visit your winery in 2017.
Okay.
And unfortunately, you weren't there, but you had a wonderful young woman named Sarah who was working at the time.
Yeah.
She was fantastic. We spent, I think, maybe 2 hours with her and had a
Oh,
blast.
oh, that's great. Sarah's a sweetheart.
And to answer, my cousin is Danny with the ridiculous beard. And to answer his question about the library wines, we had an opportunity to walk around the winery. And at that time, I was in search of your 2013 Papera. It wasn't showing at all on your computer system. As she took us on a tour, I found a box that had it written in a marker on it in the corner. And she went and actually called you and asked you if it was for sale. And you said, if it's in there, then sure, it's for sale. And I ended up buying that 6-pack. But that was the only wine that you had that wasn't of the current vintage when I was there. At least that was in your warehouse.
Oh, well, that's nice. I'm glad she took care of you.
She did. She was wonderful. But my question is, I was also lucky enough to be selected for your for the auction that you had for the Cabernet and the Pinot Noir. Do you plan on that being a one-off wines, or is this something that you plan on adding to your portfolio?
Yeah, the Cabernet for sure we've added because it does fit our portfolio because it is old vine. It's on St. George. It's dry farmed. It was planted in the 60s. So that it fits very nicely. The Pinot, I did that for my wife who absolutely adores Pinot. She loves it. And so that was a wine made for her. That was a one-off.
Happy wife, happy life wine.
Although she would like me to do that one-off every year.
There you go.
More truth from Mike.
That's good. All right, thanks, Bill. All right, Bill, I'm meeting you back, and we have DGL. Not sure who that is, but you are unmuted. DGL.
Sorry that it's David Lewin. Sorry about that.
I'm David Lewin.
Hey, David.
Hey, Mike. So you've given us a couple of years ago the Integral and then the Pinot Noir and Cabernet. Are there any other surprises coming up the pike? Well, I guess they won't be surprises if you tell us now.
Well, I don't think so, other than beginning last year, we've started up with Cytone Ranch again. William Sellian bought the vineyard a couple of years ago, and they very graciously have offered to sell me some of the old vine fruit from there. So we'll have a Cytone Ranch going forward again. But other than that, the only other wrinkle I can think of is that, so yes, we did have the Integral, but in 2018, I decided to bottle the Syrah and the Mourvedre separately. So there'll be a Radiant Ridge Bennett Valley Syrah and a Radiant Ridge Mourvedre. And the Syrah is lovely if you're a fan of northern Rhones, Syrahs. This should be right up your alley.
Cool.
And is the Mourvedre from the same source as the previous Mourvedres?
It's the same source that was in the Integral, yes. So it's the same vineyard, Radiant Ridge Vineyard in Bennett Valley.
Cool.
All right, David, I am muting you back, and then we have Sean Smith from the Santa Cruz Mountains. You're unmuted.
Frequent punch card guy there.
Yeah, he is.
So Mike, I very much enjoy sampling the different wines that you and Morgan make from the same vineyards. How did you guys get connected and start trading fruit and making these interesting wines in different styles?
Well, I actually was on vacation on Maui, I believe it was, when I got an email from Morgan asking if I was interested in some Bedrock Vineyard Zinfandel. And I, immediately was like, what? This is awesome. And so spent half the day emailing back and forth with Morgan. And when I returned from vacation, went and looked at Bedrock Vineyard and absolutely fell in love with it. And so that was kind of the start there. And then a couple years later, we both met, Jake Bilbro at Limerick Lane. And, it was very organic, basically. We all felt like kindred spirits. We all shared an interest in old vines and in California's heritage, and it's kind of fun, you know, sharing your fruit with others and seeing what they do with it, and then making wine from other vineyards.
Cheers.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Good to see you again.
All right, Sean, muted back up, and we have Jamie. You are unmuted.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hi, Jamie.
Brother of Bill Anslin that asked the question a little bit ago, and the cousin of Danny with the huge beard. So we're all connected.
Oh my gosh, all of the family. This is like the Carlisle family here.
Wow.
But we have my brother Bill to thank for getting us into your winery, and thank God he did it because it's wonderful. So my question's about Syrah. Tonight I'm having your Carlisle 2016 Syrah from Papa's Block.
Mm-hmm.
It's outstanding. I mean, very, very memorable bottle here. Question for you though is, when you make your Syrahs, do you strive to make them more in a California type way or a Northern Rhone style way in terms of how you want the finished product to be?
Well, you know, since we're in California, I think they should reflect California. So I'm not trying to make a Northern Rhone in California, but I do like elements of Northern Rhones, such as the savoriness, and a lot of Northern Rhones use a lot of whole cluster, and so we use some whole cluster on ours as well. But I think in the end, I think Papa's Block says I'm a Californian wine, but there's elements that are similar to a Northern Rhone. Yeah, so, you know, I think with every wine we make, not just Papa's Block, but all of them, we just try to make the best wine we can that showcases that vintage and that vineyard. And I realize that's awfully subjective. But, you know, once you have enough track record with a particular vineyard, you kind of get a sense of what that vineyard wants to do. So.
No, it's excellent.
No, thank you. Glad you're enjoying it.
Okay, before I call on the next question, Dan Hammer, who I know is a big fan of Carlisle, has a comment. I'm not sure if I'm sharing the comments with you, Mike, but he says, and I know this is something that Carlisle is known for, is thanks for keeping your prices reasonable over these many years since 2006. Because it is really something that Carlisle is known for. And I just wanted to be sure that you saw that, just in case I don't share the text file with you.
Yeah.
All right, next. Yeah, I think it's important. So next is Brian Lynch. You're unmuted. Brian. Brian. Step away to
Brian
Lynch.
Probably in the bathroom here is calling his name.
Yeah.
Brian.
Brian. He doesn't have his video connected, but his audio is connected. So if you're still around, Brian. All right. Lost your shot. That's the last of our questions. All right. Back to you, Frankie.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks a lot for getting on with us tonight and bringing some joy to a large group of people that rally together under this kind of common energy, which is they just love what you do. And you heard the stories and the comments that people gave you tonight. And I know these are difficult days for so many people. Everyone has kind of individual impacts. And know tonight that despite being in this fog and this uncertain future with COVID, that you helped create some joy tonight. So on behalf of Todd and I and the group, we just wanted to thank you.
Oh, well, thanks. That means a lot to us, because that's always been our primary goal, is to bring joy into people's lives. So hearing that come back, you know, that means a lot to us.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for giving up a portion of your evening tonight and for the discussions we had leading up to this evening. And to everybody on the call, and we wish you the best in our uncertain times, and we all got to stick together. So Frenchie, thank you for being my partner.
Thank you,
and
Frank.
Mike and Kendall, have a great night. And we'll talk to you guys, maybe some of you on Saturday for Marie Cortan, joined by Dominique Moreau. and then we'll have Bedrock next week, and then Vilmar next weekend.
It's a lot of stuff, everybody. Be on all of them, all right? And
Yeah.
they're all being recorded, and I will post all of them. And Mike, if you want to see the chat, which you may, because there's a lot of talk about your wines, I'm happy to email that all to you so you can see the text of the chat, okay?
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody.
Take care,
Have a great
everybody.
night. See you this weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Frenchie.